Okay, moving to retrospectives. I mentioned in daily stand-ups for that ceremony that I thought it was the second highest, most important ceremony in the Scrum framework. This, to me, retrospectives is the most important. Now, they're all important. They all work well. They go together to make up the framework, and they're there for purposes and reasons. But I have seen organizations do retrospectives and take them in and do only retrospectives and see great improvement. I've also seen teams that have started doing Scrum, and when things got busy or hectic, the first thing they cut back on were retrospectives, and they saw a decrease in their efficiency and effectiveness of what they were doing and how they were performing. So retrospectives are very, very valuable. You can see on the left here, we've got a book listed from Esther Derby, Diana Larson. This is the go-to book on Agile retrospectives. There's a lot of stuff out on the web about retrospectives. A retrospective is designed to help teams find ways to improve what they do. This is at the end of every sprint, sitting down. We've done our show and tell with our stakeholders. We're at the end. We're getting ready to start our next sprint. But before we start on the next amount of work, we want to look at the last 2 weeks, the last week, whatever, however long our sprints are, and say, okay, how did we do? Did it go well? Did it not go well? What worked well? What did we do that really made us really excel this last week or 2 weeks, this last sprint? What was it that we had a challenge with? And is it something that keeps coming up all the time? Or is it something that we keep running into? Or is it something brand new or something completely unforeseen that we couldn't have seen coming, that we may want to consider how we're going to handle it next time it happens? When you look at it, the team at a high level, the team votes to see if items discussed during the retrospective should become cards that should be played in the upcoming iterations or future iterations. There are several ways to manage the information that comes out of retrospectives. There are different ways that different organizations do it. There's no one way that works the best for one set of teams. Depending on how your team works and a lot of other things. You may find ways that work better for you than others. But what's important is that you don't just talk about this stuff and walk away, that it becomes something that stays somewhere, that stays as visible as the work in the backlog. It stays in front of the team, and it gets played into sprints in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through different types of improvement katas and things that you can learn about in the lean space, or whether it be actual cards in the backlog right next to the feature sets that you're being asked to build for stakeholders and for users. It's really, really key that this stuff comes out. It gets out in a very clear and unfettered manner, and that it's a very safe environment in order to work in. This idea on the last bullet on this page around courage, communication, feedback, and respect. That's really kind of a thing that we've used at Lean Dog for a long time. We call it CCFR. And it's really kind of a code word that we use when it's something that we need to talk to each other that's very difficult. For example, I'm going to talk with someone at work, and there's a challenge that we've been having with each other, or with something that we've been working on. And I know it's going to be a difficult conversation, but I have to bring it up, because if I don't, it's going to be something that's going to continue to linger and continue to affect our ability to work well together. So I might start a conversation to say, hey, Bill, CCFR. And what that means to them is that, hey, I've got to talk to you about something, and it's not going to be the most comfortable thing to talk about in the world. But it's important enough that I feel like, A, I need to preface it with the fact that it's a CCFR conversation for us, and B, that if we don't talk about it, I feel like that whatever it is that there's a challenge with it, it's going to continue to linger or exist. So having a safe space makes retrospectives very, very effective. Having it make sure that it operates in a way that it's not something that is commanded or demanded or forced by management or leadership. This has to be the team coming together and really working with each other and talking about their own things. This is about, how did we do? Not how did the product do. The product is a result of how well we do anyways, but it's really focused on the people on the team and the people that are interacting with each other, and what comes out of those interactions, and the different strengths, the different wins, the different losses or challenges that you're having. So there are a lot of ways to handle this. This is why there's a book on retrospectives. There are multiple websites on retrospectives. There are tools coming out all the time about them, and they can get a little bit stale. So you need to keep them fresh. I've been on teams where I've either coached them or I've worked with them, and they've gone out and they've brought in different food every week, or they have their retrospective off site. I had a group that I work with locally here in the Northeast Ohio area that used to go out and kind of make a happy hour out of it almost. They brought a trifold with them. They went to the same place every time. And it was funny because all the workers there got to see them doing this. And actually the restaurant that they went to started doing it themselves with the team that was there. So it was a fun thing. They look forward to it because it was a great way to break down the barriers and to take the anxiety out of talking about things that were not just celebratory in nature, like, hey, we really did well on this, but also some difficult things that they knew that they needed to talk about. But they created an environment that was really conducive to having frank, very respectful, professional, but to the point conversations that were moving the needle on helping them get better at what they were doing. So on this next page, here's just two examples of ways to do this. The one on the left is kind of a manual way. If you're co-located and you're doing stuff, you could do these things if they're not co-located, but this is a nice one that's been around for a long time. I like it. It's called, sometimes it's called the Starfish or the STAR approach, where you have different areas that you're talking about. You have a start doing, a stop doing, a keep doing, a less or a more section. And what's cool about that is they're actionable things in each area, right? Start doing some of this, stop doing some of that, keep doing this, do less of this, do more of that. Everything that comes up on the board is almost an action item in its own right. And you can prioritize these cards just like you prioritize backlog. In fact, you should prioritize them because you can't just stop doing work and do all these kind of improvement type things for a whole sprint. That's not the point. The point is actually blending this in to make this, in the lean world, continuous improvement, continuous learning, driving this continuous pattern of improvement and opportunity and learning and introspective and retrospecting, and then taking that out and making it something of a reality in our group. So you're getting work done, you're delivering work, but you're learning, you're growing and improving at the same time. Another key aspect as to why retrospectives are so valuable and so important to what's going on. The one on the right is a much newer technique or a much newer tool that's out there. It's not like brand new, but FunRetro is starting to become very popular in a lot of places. It has plugins to popular software. I've seen distributed teams or teams that are not co-located, which is basically the entire world right now that we're in this situation that we're dealing with COVID-19. However, even when teams were half distributed, I saw one company where they had about half the team was contractors from a different company. They were all over the globe, and the other half were employees of a company. They were inside the company. This worked really well because it allowed people to interact as if they were in the same room. They had their video chats on. They were using Teams in this case, this example I'm giving you. So they see each other's faces. They had this up on the board as a share. They could see each other typing and moving. They could vote on things. I even had someone go in and do a leadership retrospective on their strategic planning session. They had just gone through and done strategic planning, and then they used this because half the leaders were all over the country as well. So it was a great way to become very action focused, to get everybody's points of view in. All the voices were heard. In the case of a leadership group, there's usually no silent voices. But in teams, there's a lot of times there's silent voices, and they never get heard, and they have lots of great ideas. Maybe they even have issues with things, but they're not the forward. They're not very forward in their personas, so they don't jump up front and say, "Hey, I got this thing," right? You need to create an environment where the silent voice gets heard, where these things happen. It's a safe environment, but it's proactive, it's productive. In this case, with FunRetro, you're also capturing those in terms of cards. And in some cases where FunRetro plugs into systems, you can turn them into story cards right into your backlog, into your digital backlog as well. So there's a lot of ways to do retrospectives. It's great to investigate and look up. It's critical to becoming really good at Scrum, at iterative delivery, at Agile mindsets applied to your work, and even becoming more lean. It's really, really, really important.